Hi, welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. Hope you had a good week. Today we're going to take a look at overcrank faults. That's fault code 3737, I believe. And yeah, 3737. And you'll only log overcrank faults if in your features and parameters they have overcrank protection turned on. And basically what that does is if the engine won't start, the ECM will stop the starter from running. The way they do that is when you turn the ignition key to crank, instead of that wire going to a primary solenoid that feeds the solenoid on the starter, that wire goes to the ECM, and then the ECM has another terminal that it sends a signal out, 12 volts basically, if it's a 12 volt system, to that primary solenoid so that it closes and then it engages the starter. So now while you're cranking, the ECM is watching the engine RPM and it's controlling the starter. And it will basically let the engine crank for 15 seconds, and if it doesn't fire, it'll just quit cranking. And then you have to key off, and you have to wait about 30 seconds, and then you can key on, and it'll let you try it again for about 15 seconds. And then that same feature, once the engine's running, if someone would turn the ignition key to crank, it will not, the ECM will not engage the starter solenoid. This, as I understand it, this feature was asked for many years ago by not only the off-road industry, but also by companies that had big fleets where they had a lot of slip seat drivers, and sometimes they had drivers that were inexperienced. And sometimes those trucks will go someplace and they'll back in to get a trailer, and there's a lot of noise around there. There might be machinery running, and the guy can't even hear if the engine is started because it's so noisy. I've been in places like that where it's so noisy, believe it or not, I wouldn't be able to hear if the truck starter was cranking. So they can hold that key to crank all day long. And once that engine starts, the ECM is going to shut that solenoid off, and they don't damage the flywheel or the starter pinion teeth. So that's the deal with overcrank protection. And now we're going to look at a unit quick that had a fault code for overcrank protection. It actually had quite a few fault codes, but we're only going to look at the overcrank protection fault and the snapshot of that fault so you can see what happened. Thanks for joining me in Engine Shop Joe. We'll finish this and then have a nice week. So this is the fault snapshot, and I put a little green box there and put the fault code in 3737, which is overcrank protection, if you look up what that number means. And the third line down is engine operating state, and you can see that log cranked or logged while the engine was cranking. Now, on Cummins engines, the ECM runs in defined states. It's not fluid like we are, where we walk over and we pick up a bag of sand and put it in a wheelbarrow. We pick up the wheelbarrow and we roll it into the backyard, cut the bag open, and shovel some dirt in the garden. If the ECM had to do that, it would go into pick up the bag mode. It'd pick the bag up and then it would stop. Then it would go into put the bag in the wheelbarrow mode. It would put the bag in the wheelbarrow and then it would stop. Then it would go into pick the wheelbarrow up mode. It would pick the wheelbarrow up off the ground. And then it would go into roll the wheelbarrow mode. And then, so you get the idea. And that's how the ECM runs. Now the engine runs smoothly, but all day long the software is changing states to different operating states. Why does it do that? It does it because it has to go look at what's called tables of minimum and maximum allowed values for the sensors, for the torque at the flywheel, for all those things. So as the operating state changes, so do the tables that it looks at. Well, not all of them, but most of them in each state. So that's why it does it. And so you can see that the engine was actually cranking when it logged this fault. And that was because it was cranking longer than 15 seconds. Let's look at our second part of this same fault snapshot. Now, I can tell right away by looking at the values in the snapshot, which come out of the calibration, that this was in a crane. I know that because we've got a value for final frequency adjust, we've got final rated speed reference, and towards the bottom we have gain adjustment type, which is a potentiometer. So what I wanted us to look at here, this is more values that were in that same snapshot we just looked at that showed it was in the crank state. And we're trying to figure out why it wouldn't start. So we go down to fuel rail pressure towards the bottom, and commanded was 5,559 and measured was 328. So this engine's never going to start if it doesn't have at least about 4,500 psi of fuel pressure. So that's why it wouldn't start. Now, you've probably had seen many instances where an engine doesn't start. They crank it till the starter's smoking. It's making no measured fuel pressure, and that's only why it doesn't start. But you don't have any overcrank protection. That's because it wasn't turned on. Now, not all ECM calibrations will show that option in the features and parameters, because long ago and far, far away, when Cummins started writing calibrations, customers would go to them and say, hey, we would like it if you would put this option in here for this reason. And if enough people asked for it, and if it was reasonable and made sense, they would write it into the calibration. But they didn't write it into every calibration because they had multiple programmers writing multiple calibrations in multiple markets. You had automotive, marine, worldwide off-highway, high horsepower, mid-range, just the gamut. And then you had power generation. That's an whole nother thing. So it's not like they take a cookie cutter of the parameters and it's go bam, 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 bam in all of the calibrations. So your calibration may not have this available in it if you'd want it. If you're an owner-operator, you probably know 15 seconds is as long as I'm going to crank my starter. Oh, I could crank at 30, I could crank at 45, but you do that a few times and you've taken a lot of start cycles off of the starter's life. Not to mention it's hard on the batteries and the cables and the connections and everything. So that's what overcrank protection is. Now you understand what it does, why it's there, how it got there, and in this case, why the engine wouldn't start. So thank you for joining me on Engine Shop Joe. See you next time. Subscribe. Please give it a thumbs up if it helped you or you liked it. Tell your friends about this and leave comments if you have questions. I've been off a little on comments. I'll get better. I've got more time now. I had some stuff going on between working full-time and taking care of some other problems. So I should be able to have a little more time to look at comments now. So thanks for sticking with the channel, and we'll see you next time. Engine Shop Joe out.